Now we come to a very interesting part of the paper. This is we have done 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. This is question number 3. This is 3A, and it has 3 quotations. And basically, they ask that what do you understand by the following quotations in the present context? The thing is that the first quotation is of Swami Vivekananda. Learn everything that is good from others, but bring it in your own way. Bring it in and in your own way absorb it. Do not become others. This is a quotation, and you have to tell what do you understand by this quotation in the present context. There are simple steps of answering this code-based question. I do it in 5 steps. This is what I have taught you earlier. If you have attended the class earlier, and for people who are new, I'm going to give you those 5 steps verbally. You can note it down if you want. The first step is you explain what are the terms, decode the question. See, the quotation always is an encryption. Quotation is an encrypted form of knowledge, the encrypted form of information. The things are not very clear. You have to decipher what the quote means. That's why they give quote and they ask you, what do you mean by this quote? And you never layer encryption over encryption. You layer decryption over encryption. So when there's encryption, what you have to do is decryption. Generally, students, many a times, they start with another quote when they're answering a particular quote. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to layer encryption with encryption. So when a quote is there, you have to make it simple. You have to explain the terms and phrases in the quote, number 1. Number 2, you have to justify the quote. Whatever the quote is saying, you have to justify that with some theory. If I tell you that don't walk fast if the floor is slippery, if I tell you this, then somebody asks you, why does he say that? What he means by that? Then I'll explain you with the theory of friction. I'll explain you by the theory of Newton's law of motion. Since friction is there, so the force will not be applied on you for horizontal movement. If you try to move fast, F is equal to ma. If you are expecting higher acceleration, there is no force to provide that acceleration. So you will go lower than your expectation, and there will be some miscoordination between your mind and your body, and you will fall. You will not be prepared for what is happening, you will fall. So what he said, I explained by a theory. Correct? So that's what you have to do in the second step. Whatever is written here, you have to explain by a theory. What Swamiji is saying, explain it with a particular theory of ethics that you have studied. That's step 2. Step 3 is give the present context. After so much of explanation of the term and overall explanation of the quote, you have to tell what is the significance of this quote in the present context. Step 3. Step 4 is you add some complementary point to the quote. A quote can never be complete in its meaning. जो कुछ भी बोला जा रहा है, जो कुछ भी कोई समझा रहा है, वो कंप्लीट हो ही नहीं सकता in a sentence. It is impossible to give absolute, eternal truth, complete truth in a line. There will be something that will be missing. To find what is missing and add to it without contradicting the idea of the quote. That's step 4. Step 5 is to contradict the idea contextually. Because we have defended the quote, you can't not demolish the quote. You can't go take a 180 degree flip. We have justified the quote, we have added meaning to the quote, but contextually it may be wrong, although it applies by and large, but in certain scenario it doesn't apply. That is antithesis. That's 5th step. And the sixth step is to guide prescription. That so far you have explained, defended the quote. How does it implement in the real life? You have to give prescription as to how to implement the quote in real life. All right. So those are the 6 steps you keep in mind, and that's how I'll be taking up the answer to this. Learn. The first word here is learn. Learn, read, recite, seek knowledge. Knowledge is equal to virtue. According to Socrates, you have to learn. Learn everything. You have to learn everything. That shows that you have to be open-minded. You have to be hungry. You have to be thirsty for knowledge. You have to be inquisitive. You should be seeking the truth. So you try and your hand on everything because you're seeking the truth. You do not know where the truth is hidden. So you try it out, everything that comes across you. Learn everything. Be open minded. Have the humility to learn from others. Learn everything that is good. What is good? Good is something that is moral, good is something that is ethical. So, what is good has to be learned. You have to. There's an obligation to practice ethics. So, if you find something is good in its nature, you have to adopt it. There's an obligation to practice ethics. Learn everything that is good. This shows that there is inherent obligation to practice ethics and from others. Others here could mean anything. Others here could be people unknown to you from other culture. Others here could mean from people from other organization, other nations. You learn from others. This shows that you have intellectual humility, that you understand that you have limitations of knowledge, and B, you have to respect others so that others can also grant you information and grant you knowledge. So that you can learn from others. So this small line, learn everything that is good from others, it means a lot. And if you wish, you can explain them term by term. Then it goes on, but bring it in, imbibe it, practice it, become virtuous in your own way. In your own way, absorb it. What does this mean? In your own way. We have done a question, we are yet to do, I think, on contextuality. And there are questions coming in this paper on this very idea that you have to bring it in your own way. Why in your own way? You have to bring it in your own way to preserve the authenticity of your living. To have an authentic life. So that you're not just copying. You can apply the principle looking at your context. You can maintain authenticity of your life and you can maintain contextuality of the principles that you're bringing in. Do not become others. Maintain, preserve your originality. So this question basically, this quotation of Swamiji actually is what you do in society chapter. That you adopt other culture, but you preserve also the core part of your culture. So when there's globalization, then the other culture do come in, but the core values of Indian society do get preserved. So when you take something, a new technology or new idea from elsewhere, you have to adapt it. When you adopt a foreign idea, you have to adapt it to the local context. Ethics has three characteristics. Ethics is universal. The good for you is same as good for me. Everybody has to follow that good. But ethics is also contextual despite being universal. You may practice the good in your own way. I will practice the good in my own way. So ethics is universal and contextual. And this quotation of Swamiji is focusing on the contextuality of ethics, not relativity. Relativity means that you follow some different principle, I would follow some other principle. Those principles are good for you, my principles are good for me. That's relativity. But this is not relativity. This is not relativity. This is contextuality. You take the same principles like freedom of speech and expression in European countries, in many of the Nordic nations are practiced to the extreme. Extreme freedom in writing things, in giving your speech. You can say, you can hurt sentiments and you can freely write and freely speak. But in India, there are inherent restrictions on freedom of speech and expression. There are constitutional restrictions. There are restrictions by the court judgments. There are restrictions by the executive order. There are restrictions by social morality. You restrict from saying things that would hurt others' religious sentiment. Because religion is an intricate part of Indian society and there is huge diversity. So for the stability of the society, it is not permissible to hurt other sentiment. That's not also moral or rational. The thing is that the principle of freedom of speech and expression is everywhere in on modern democracy, but it is not practiced to the same degree everywhere. So the thing is, ethics has to be universal. Ethics also has to be contextual. When we adopt something, we also have to adapt to our context. The significance of the word learn here, you have to learn Because if we do not learn, we do not grow. There is no moral development. There is no salvation of man without education, without knowledge. Knowledge is equal to virtue. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of salvation. So learn, 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 read, 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 seek knowledge, learn everything, have open mindedness, do continuous learning, do self actualization. As Aristotle has suggested, that we have to become the best version of ourselves. Learn everything. That is good. There's an idea of eclecticism. Eclecticism means that you choose from the given ideas, a plethora of ideas, the best ideas. For example, Indian Constitution, while it was being framed, it chose the best ideas from all other constitution. What Indian Constitution makers did is called as eclecticism, selecting the best ideas from various sources. So learn everything that is good. There's an obligation for you to practice good, and you have to choose the good from everything, from others. There has to be an idea of cultural exchange and diversity, and you have to learn from others. You could be restricted in your own learning. That is intellectual humility. Bring it in and make it your own. Bring it in and in your own way absorb it. So there has to be adaptation and contextualization of principles. Mindlessly adopting a foreign model is not suggested. You do that in economy, you do that in polity, you do that in society. Mindless adaptation of a foreign model doesn't work. So when you bring it in, do it in your own way. That is contextualization. It's a very important characteristic of ethics. There's another thing that it also adheres to the principle of autonomy, meaning you are free to decide. That is liberty. You can choose what to do, and you can do it in your own way. There is no imposition. You have obligation to follow the good, but you also have the freedom, liberty, using your wisdom to practice it in your own context. That is the principle of autonomy. And you have to also apply creativity, imagination, that we saw as the last stage of decision making in applying the knowledge, depending on the context. Do not become others. Have an authentic life, have an individual authenticity. That is the idea of existentialist philosophy. Be yourself. So those are the significance of the different terms in the quotation. You can either write on all of them or at least on some of them in the introduction. This is what is meant by the different terms. What is meant by the whole of quotation? By the whole of quotation, it means a lot of things. It actually explains the constructivist theory of learning, where individuals actively construct their understanding based on their experience and context. If you see the theory of knowledge of Aristotle, it is based on two things: perception and reason. You have to perceive things around, and then you have to apply reason to make sense of what you have perceived. So that's what Swamiji is also saying. Whatever comes in, bring it in your own way, applying your own wisdom, applying your own prudence. That is what is also suggested in the theory of knowledge of Aristotle. Perceive things around, but also apply reason. It's perception and reason both that leads to knowledge. And this quote of Swami Vivekananda also taking a balanced approach to personal and cultural growth. When you bring it in other things, then culture becomes rich, of course. But when you do it in your own way, then individuality becomes rich. Authentic life becomes rich. And there has to be a balance in these two things. So basically, the quote is based upon learning, adaptation, and self-realization. These are some core theories. So step one, you explain the terms. Step two, you explain the whole quote using one or two theory. Those are the two steps of what do I understand by the quote. Then the third step is to give some current affair related significance. In the age of social media and information overload, actually we have to be a very conscious learner. And in the time of deepfake, in the time of fake news, you cannot bring it in everything without a judgment call, without application of mind, without reasoning, without consciousness. You cannot allow to bring it in, come in everything. You can't bring it in everything. That's this idea of the quote, and that is very significant in the information overload, fake news, deepfake of current times. Maintaining cultural identity in a globalized world. That's also the context for the quote. It offers also a blueprint for innovation in business. You should not just take technology or copy technology. You should adapt and contextualize it depending upon the different needs, depending upon the different uh, services that you're giving or different sections that you're catering to. That's the context. You can write one or two contexts. That's the third step of answering the code-based question. Then the thing is that there could be some complementary points. When you bring it in your own way, actually, there are certain things that code doesn't touch upon. So you have to add more to what's written in the code. Self-reflection, the importance of that, and the importance of critical thinking, the importance of reasoning, that is not highlighted in the code. I told you in one line, you cannot put eternal, absolute, complete truth. कुछ ना कुछ तो छूटेगा. And what you have to take your best of effort to is to write those things. After you have explained on the code, write a little more than what appears in the code. Always you have to take an extra effort. Extra effort in life is what counts. So you have to go a little bit beyond the scope of the code, and then you have to write the complementary points. There could be antithesis, meaning the code is right, of course, but in certain context it won't apply, especially in the field of requiring technical skills. Exact replication is necessary. For example, if you have taken the genome of coronavirus from elsewhere, and you have to reconstruct that in the lab, you will not bring it in your own way. You will bring it in the exact same way. So sometimes the code will not apply. You have to enrich the answer in highlighting those contexts as well where the code will not apply. It is a very crucial part, so that you are not bound by the code. You have an open mind, and you do not oversubscribe to the idea of the code. This is very important to add antithesis towards at least a line. So those are the 5 steps. Now the 6th step is when the Swami Vivekananda suggests contextuality, suggests wisdom, suggests reasoning, suggests individual acting as principle, PAL principle, to implement the principles, PLE principles. How to do that? How to prepare individuals, organizations, and society to not copy the ideas or principles as it is. How to develop that human capacity. In a line or two, you have to write that. I'm giving you many points here, but you can't afford to write so much in the conclusion. It will be maximum 3 lines. In 3 lines, putting commas, you can write 2-3 ideas, diverse ideas at different levels, maybe one at individual level, one at organizational level, and one at social level, as to how to implement the idea. You can practice open-mindedness by practicing tolerance and empathy. You can learn critical thinking by doing logical reasoning exercise. You can encourage cultural synthesis. You can increase EI and self-awareness component of EI. You can develop creativity through some of the challenges like hackathon challenge, other things. You can encourage authentic life. You can have intellectual humility, practicing intellectual humility by declaring the lapse in your knowledge. There's a practice in UK civil services that you have to evaluate your own decisions of the past and see how differently you can do it now, or how differently you will decide on the same matter now since you have experience and you have the benefit of knowing the result. So that is intellectual humility. If you agree that you will do it differently, if you agree that there were lapses in the faults and you will do better that now, that's intellectual humility. Those exercises teaches you to, when you receive an idea, to apply your mind on that, and then with wisdom you do the applications. So this is the learning. This is how in these 6 steps you will be handling the code-based questions.